I stood outside my sister's debt-free celebration party, watching through the frosted window as our parents raised champagne glasses to toast Madison's achievement. After 8 grueling years of medical school together, both of us had graduated with identical degrees and identical debt loads of $200,000. Yet our parents had written a check to clear Madison's loans entirely, while telling me that Madison deserved it more because she chose pediatrics over dermatology. The betrayal cut deeper because I had sacrificed my dream specialty to become a rural family doctor, thinking it would make our parents proud of my service to underserved communities. The December wind whipped against my car windshield as I sat in the driveway, gathering courage to walk into what felt like my own execution. The warmth glowing from inside our childhood home seemed to mock the cold reality settling in my chest. This favoritism wasn't new. It was a pattern woven so deeply into our family fabric that I had spent 28 years convincing myself it was normal. When Madison and I were 12, she received a shiny red mountain bike for earning C-plus grades, while my straight A report card earned a distracted pat on the head from Dad. Mom had explained that Madison needed more encouragement because academics came harder for her. I remember nodding sagely, already learning to rationalize away the sting. High school brought theater performances where our parents occupied front row seats for every one of Madison's minor roles, yet somehow missed my debate championships despite months of advance notice. Dad always had surgery scheduled during my tournaments, while Mom discovered urgent hospital meetings during my victories. But when Madison forgot her lines during the spring musical, they took the entire family to Disney World to cheer her up. College applications became another exercise in unequal investment. Madison received expensive SAT tutors, college admission consultants, and application essay coaching that cost more than most families' annual vacations. When I asked for similar support, Mom handed me a prep book from the library and suggested I was smart enough to figure it out myself. The underlying message was clear. Madison needed help to succeed while I was expected to achieve without assistance. We both got accepted to the same prestigious medical school in Boston, but the celebrations couldn't have been more different. Madison's acceptance triggered a family vacation to celebrate her achievement and help her transition to the next phase of life. When my acceptance letter arrived 2 days later, Dad glanced up from his medical journals and said, "Well, we always knew you'd get in somewhere good." The 8 years of medical school that followed were a masterclass in selective attention. Our parents flew to Boston for Madison's white coat ceremony, but missed mine due to a hospital fundraising dinner Dad couldn't reschedule. When Madison struggled with organic chemistry, they hired a private tutor at $300 per hour. When I struggled with the same subject, Mom suggested I form a study group with classmates who might benefit from my help. Dr. Richard Warren. Our father was a successful cardiovascular surgeon whose reputation commanded respect throughout New England's medical community. Patricia Warren, our mother, had transitioned from nursing to hospital administration, climbing the ranks to become regional director of patient services. They were pillars of medical excellence who understood the financial pressures facing new doctors, yet they chose to alleviate those pressures for only one daughter. Madison's personality had always been her strongest asset. Charming and socially gifted, she could light up any room with her infectious laugh and natural ability to make people feel special. Academic achievements required tremendous effort from her, but she compensated with interpersonal skills that made professors remember her fondly and patients request her specifically during clinical rotations. My personality tended toward quiet competence. I absorbed information, quickly analyzed problems systematically, and approached challenges with methodical determination. Professors respected my work ethic, but I didn't possess Madison's natural charisma or social magnetism. Our parents seemed to value her sparkle over my substance, her potential over my performance. The debt we both accumulated was identical $200,000 in federal student loans at varying interest rates. Madison chose pediatrics partly because she genuinely loved working with children, but also because the specialty offered reasonable hours and suburban practice opportunities near our hometown in Connecticut. I chose family medicine specifically to serve rural communities in Montana, drawn to areas where access to quality health care remained limited and challenging. When we announced our specialty choices, our parents' reactions revealed everything about their priorities. Madison's decision earned praise for its nobility and child-centered focus. My choice prompted concerned conversations about wasted potential and geographic isolation. Dad actually asked whether I was running away from competition, while Mom worried that rural practice would limit my professional networking opportunities. The loan payment justification they offered stung with its casual cruelty. "Pediatricians don't make as much money, honey," Mom had explained over dinner 3 weeks earlier. "Madison needs more help getting started. You've always been the tough one who can handle anything." The underlying assumption was that my resilience somehow disqualified me from receiving the same support they freely offered my sister. Aunt Helen, Mom's younger sister, had been the only family member to occasionally question the obvious disparity in treatment. During holiday gatherings, she would make pointed comments about fairness and equal opportunity that our parents deflected with practiced ease. Helen worked as a paralegal for a prestigious law firm and possessed a sharp eye for injustice that made family dynamics uncomfortable for everyone except me. As I finally stepped out of my car and approached the front door, I could hear laughter and conversation spilling from the living room windows. The party was in full swing, celebrating Madison's debt-free future, while my own financial burden remained unacknowledged and unaddressed. The contrast felt deliberately orchestrated to emphasize my lesser status within the family hierarchy. But as I reached for the brass door handle that Dad had polished to gleaming perfection, I overheard a conversation that made my blood freeze. Through the slightly open window, I caught Dad's voice addressing a group of his medical colleagues who had gathered near the piano. "We're planning to help Madison with a down payment for a house, too," he was saying with obvious pride. "She shouldn't have to worry about financial stress while establishing her practice. Gwendolyn has always been the tough one who can handle anything life throws at her. She doesn't need the same level of support." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they chosen to eliminate Madison's debt while ignoring mine, but they were already planning additional financial gifts that would further widen the gap between their daughters. The casual dismissal of my struggles, the assumption that my strength somehow disqualified me from receiving equal treatment, revealed a fundamental lack of respect that went far beyond money. I stood frozen on the threshold, hand still reaching toward the door handle, as the full weight of their favoritism settled over me like a suffocating blanket. The Warren family home gleamed with understated elegance that spoke to decades of medical success and careful social positioning. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished hardwood floors, while fresh flower arrangements from the country club's preferred florist adorned every surface. The guest list read like a who's who of Connecticut's medical and social elite department heads, from prestigious hospitals, successful private practice physicians, and influential community leaders who could advance a young doctor's career with a single recommendation. Madison stood at the center of the living room, radiant in a designer cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent in Montana. The deep emerald fabric complemented her auburn hair perfectly, and diamond earrings that I had never seen before caught the light with every animated gesture. She was holding court with a group of pediatric residents, regaling them with stories from our medical school adventures, while graciously accepting congratulations on her debt-free status. I had chosen a simple black dress from my practical wardrobe, something appropriate for the occasion, but clearly not purchased for maximum impact. Standing among the elegantly dressed crowd, I felt like a shadow at my own family's celebration. The contrast wasn't accidental. Madison had always possessed an innate understanding of how to present herself for maximum effect, while I prioritized function over form in most aspects of life. Cousin Bradley approached me near the kitchen doorway, balancing a plate of catered appetizers and wearing the slightly uncomfortable expression of someone navigating delicate family politics. As a successful corporate attorney, Bradley had always been perceptive about power dynamics and financial inequities. His congratulations felt genuine but cautious. "Gwendolyn, congratulations on completing your residency," he said warmly. "Rural family medicine is incredibly important work. I have to say, though, the difference in parental support between you and Madison seems rather interesting." His tone was carefully neutral, but his raised eyebrow suggested deeper thoughts about the obvious disparity. Before I could respond, family friend Dr. Martinez joined our conversation. He had known our family for 15 years and served as a mentor to both Madison and me during high school volunteer work at his clinic. His confusion about the loan situation was evident in his carefully worded questions. "Both of you girls accomplished the same incredible achievement," he said thoughtfully. 8 years of medical school successful residency matches bright futures ahead. I'm curious about the financial arrangements your parents made. It seems like student debt would be equally challenging regardless of specialty choice." The question hung in the air like an uncomfortable truth that nobody wanted to address directly. I fumbled for a diplomatic response that wouldn't embarrass my parents or create family drama, but the effort of maintaining the facade was becoming increasingly difficult. Grandmother rose. Mom's 78-year-old mother appeared beside me with the silent grace she had perfected over decades of navigating family complexities. Her sharp blue eyes missed nothing, and her knowing glances had been making me uncomfortable throughout the evening. She possessed an old-fashioned directness that cut through social pretenses with surgical precision. "Gwendolyn, dear, could you help me find a quiet place to sit?" she asked with deceptive frailty. "These parties are lovely, but they can be overwhelming for someone my age." The request was clearly a pretext for private conversation, and I followed her gratefully toward the study that Dad used for reviewing medical journals. Once we were alone, Grandmother Rose's demeanor shifted completely. The fragile elderly woman disappeared, replaced by someone with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. She had been watching the family dynamics with growing concern, and her patience with diplomatic silence was apparently exhausted. "This favoritism has gone on long enough," she said bluntly, settling into Dad's leather reading chair with determination. "I've been documenting instances of unequal treatment for months, hoping your parents would recognize their behavior and correct it. Instead, they seem to be doubling down on their preferences." Her words confirmed what I had suspected but never heard acknowledged by another family member. The relief of having someone else recognize the pattern was overwhelming, but it also opened floodgates of emotion that I had been suppressing for years. Meanwhile, Aunt Helen found me in the kitchen during a brief escape from the social performance required in the main rooms. Her expression was a mixture of anger and protective concern that reminded me why she had always been my favorite relative. As a paralegal, she possessed a keen sense of justice and fair treatment that made the family's behavior particularly offensive to her professional sensibilities. "This whole situation is absolutely ridiculous," she said quietly, checking to ensure we weren't being overheard. "I've been watching this favoritism poison family relationships for years, and tonight's celebration is just rubbing salt in the wound. Madison gets a debt-free future while you're expected to be grateful for the privilege of struggle." Her validation meant more to me than she probably realized. For years, I had wondered whether I was being overly sensitive or failing to appreciate my parents' perspective. Having someone else confirm that the treatment was genuinely unfair helped me trust my own perceptions and emotions. The most painful moment came when Madison pulled me aside for what she probably intended as a sisterly bonding conversation. We stepped onto the back patio where string lights created a romantic ambiance that seemed to mock the tension between us. The December air was crisp and clear, providing a sharp contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside the house. "I know this might feel weird for you," Madison began with the casual tone of someone addressing a minor inconvenience. "But you have to understand that I really needed this help more than you do. Pediatric salaries are lower, and I'm planning to work in an affluent suburb where establishing a practice requires significant upfront investment." The selfishness in her reasoning was breathtaking. She continued explaining her plans to use her debt-free status as leverage for purchasing luxury items that would help her fit in with her target demographic. A new BMW was first on the list, followed by a designer wardrobe suitable for country club events where she planned to network with potential patients' families. "You should probably just get over it," she concluded with a shrug that dismissed years of accumulated resentment. "Maybe you could consider switching to a more lucrative specialty if money is really that important to you. Rural family medicine seems like martyrdom complex more than career strategy." The casual cruelty of her suggestion revealed how little she understood about my motivations or the sacrifices I had made to serve underserved communities. Her assumption that financial reward was my primary concern showed a fundamental disconnect between our values and priorities. But the conversation that truly shattered my remaining illusions happened when I accidentally overheard Madison talking to Mom in the hallway outside Dad's study. I had returned to check on Grandmother Rose and caught fragments of their conversation through the partially open door. "Gwendolyn has been acting weird all night," Madison was saying with obvious irritation. "She keeps giving me these looks like I've done something wrong. I think she might be developing some kind of martyrdom complex about her career choices. Maybe you should talk to her about being more supportive." Mom's response was even more devastating. "Your sister has always been prone to dramatic reactions when she doesn't get her way. The student loan situation is really about helping you where you need it most. Gwendolyn will figure things out because she always does." The casual dismissal of my feelings and the characterization of legitimate hurt as dramatic overreaction revealed how little respect they had for my perspective. They had convinced themselves that their favoritism was actually wise parental strategy rather than deeply damaging preferential treatment. As the evening wore on, I found myself gravitating toward Dad's home office, seeking a few minutes of solitude away from the celebration that felt increasingly like my own wake. The room reflected his professional success, medical diplomas from prestigious institutions, awards from surgical societies, and photographs with distinguished colleagues from around the world. But as I sat in his desk chair trying to process the emotional assault of the evening, my eyes fell on a stack of papers that had been carelessly left on the desk blotter. The top document was a financial statement from their investment advisor showing account balances that made my breath catch in my throat. The numbers revealed that our parents possessed more than enough liquid assets to pay both daughters' student loans without any significant impact on their financial security. The decision to help Madison while ignoring me wasn't about limited resources or careful financial planning. It was a deliberate choice to prioritize one daughter over another based on undefined preferences and biases. But the second document was even more shocking, a draft of their updated will that outlined the distribution of their considerable estate. Madison was set to inherit the family home, Dad's share of his medical practice, and the bulk of their investment portfolio. My inheritance was a cash amount that represented less than 20% of the total estate value. The will revealed that their favoritism wasn't just about current support, but about long-term financial planning that would perpetuate inequality between their daughters for generations. They were systematically ensuring that Madison would inherit wealth and assets while I received a token acknowledgement of my relationship to them. The discovery hit me like a physical blow, leaving me sitting in Dad's chair with my hands shaking and my mind reeling from the implications of what I had learned. The confrontation with my parents couldn't be postponed any longer. I found them in the kitchen supervising the catering staff's cleanup while basking in the afterglow of Madison's successful celebration. The contrast between their jovial mood and my emotional turmoil created a surreal atmosphere that made the approaching conversation feel like stepping into an alternate reality. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," I said quietly, hoping to maintain some semblance of family dignity despite the explosive nature of what I had discovered. "Could we step into the study for a few minutes?" Their expressions shifted from post-party satisfaction to wary concern as they followed me down the hallway. Dad's surgical training had taught him to recognize crisis situations, and Mom's administrative experience had honed her ability to sense brewing conflicts. They exchanged meaningful glances that suggested they had been expecting this conversation. Once the study door closed behind us, I placed the financial documents on Dad's desk with deliberate precision. The investment statement and will draft lay between us like evidence in a trial where I was simultaneously prosecutor and victim. Their faces went pale as they recognized the papers and understood the implications of my discovery. I need to understand something. I began with forced calm. You have more than enough money to pay both daughters' student loans without any financial hardship. The decision to help Madison while ignoring me wasn't about limited resources. It was a conscious choice to favor one child over another. Dad's defensive response revealed years of rationalization that had allowed him to justify the favoritism. You've always been more capable of handling challenges, Gwendolyn. Madison needed our support to succeed in ways that you simply don't require. We were being strategic about where our help would make the most difference. The logic was both circular and insulting. They had decided I was stronger and more capable, then used that assessment to justify withholding support that would have been equally valuable to me. My competence became a disqualification for receiving equal treatment rather than evidence that I deserved the same investment in my future. Mom's contribution to the conversation was even more revealing. Madison reminds us more of ourselves when we were starting out. You've always been different, more independent, more willing to choose difficult paths. We worried that too much support might undermine the strength that makes you special. The admission that Madison reminded them of themselves while I was fundamentally different explained years of subtle alienation that I had never fully understood. They identified with Madison's personality and career choices while viewing me as an outsider whose values and priorities remained mysteriously foreign to them. Patricia continued with mounting defensiveness. We've been worried about Madison's ability to succeed in medicine without extra support. Her academic struggles in medical school made us realize that she needed more help to reach her potential. You never gave us any indication that you were struggling or needed assistance. The assumption that my competence meant I didn't need support revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of motivation and fairness. They had interpreted my success as evidence that I required no encouragement, while Madison's struggles triggered protective instincts that manifested as preferential treatment. Richard's perspective on my career choices added another layer of disappointment to an already devastating conversation. Your decision to practice rural medicine is beneath your potential, Gwendolyn. You could have chosen any specialty, worked anywhere, built a prestigious practice that would reflect well on our family. Instead, you're choosing to isolate yourself in Montana, where nobody will recognize your achievements. The revelation that they viewed my service to underserved communities as a waste of my education and a source of family embarrassment cut deeper than any financial favoritism. They had never understood or respected my motivations for choosing rural medicine, interpreting my commitment to social justice as some kind of rebellious phase that would eventually pass. Mom added her perspective on family reputation with painful honesty. Madison's career path looks better to our social circle. Pediatrics in an affluent suburb is prestigious and visible. Rural family medicine seems like hiding your light under a bushel, especially when you could have chosen dermatology or another lucrative specialty. Their concern about appearances within their social circle revealed priorities that I had never fully appreciated. My career choices were being evaluated based on how they reflected on the family's status rather than on their intrinsic value or my personal fulfillment. Madison's path enhanced their reputation, while mine apparently diminished it. As the conversation continued, I felt the last vestiges of family loyalty crumbling under the weight of their casual dismissal of my worth and choices. The people who should have been my biggest supporters had spent years undermining my confidence and questioning my decisions while lavishing encouragement on Madison for accomplishments that required far less effort and sacrifice. But the most painful revelation came when I confronted them directly about the will and the systematic inequality it represented. This isn't just about student loans. You're planning to perpetuate this favoritism through your estate planning, ensuring that Madison inherits wealth and assets while I receive a token inheritance. Dad's response was defensive but illuminating. Madison will need more support throughout her life. She's more social, more likely to maintain family traditions and relationships. The house and practice should go to someone who will preserve our family legacy in ways that matter to our community. The implication that I was less likely to maintain family relationships and traditions because of my career choices and geographic location revealed how completely they had written me off as a meaningful part of their future plans. They saw Madison as their true heir while viewing me as someone who had chosen to remove herself from family consideration. Before I could fully process the implications of their admissions, my phone rang with a call that would change everything. Aunt Helen's voice was tight with urgency when I answered, and she asked to speak with me privately about a matter that couldn't wait until after the party. I stepped onto the back patio while my parents remained in the study, probably grateful for the interruption that allowed them to regroup their defenses. Helen's voice carried the kind of controlled intensity that she used when delivering crucial information to attorneys preparing for trial. "Gwendolyn, I need to tell you something important about your father's medical practice." She began without preamble. "I've been quietly investigating some financial irregularities that came to my attention through professional channels. There's evidence that Richard has been embezzling money from the practice to fund Madison's lifestyle while using legitimate savings to pay her student loans." The information hit me like a physical blow. The favoritism I had endured for years wasn't just about parental preferences. It was connected to actual financial crimes that could destroy our entire family. Dad had been stealing money from his medical partners and patients to fund Madison's privileged lifestyle while maintaining the appearance of successful family support. Helen continued with devastating detail. "The practice's other partners have discovered discrepancies in billing and patient funds. There's going to be an investigation, and Richard faces potential loss of his medical license and criminal charges. Patricia's position at the hospital is also threatened because of the scandal." The scope of the crisis expanded far beyond family dynamics into professional ruin and legal consequences that could affect everyone connected to the Warren family name. The debt-free celebration that had felt so painful was actually funded by criminal activity that was about to be exposed to the legal system and medical community. But the final revelation was the most shocking of all. "Gwendolyn, there's something else you need to know. Based on the evidence I've seen, Madison hasn't been just a passive beneficiary of this favoritism. She's been actively participating in the financial misconduct. The implication that my sister had knowingly participated in fraud while portraying herself as a deserving recipient of parental support shattered any remaining hope for family reconciliation. The debt-free celebration wasn't just about favoritism. It was a criminal conspiracy that had been funded by theft and deception." Grandmother Rose's call came at 6:30 the next morning, her voice sharp with urgency despite the early hour. I was still lying awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the revelations from the previous evening. Sleep had been impossible after learning about Dad's financial crimes and Madison's apparent complicity in the scheme. "Gwendolyn, dear, I need to see you immediately," she said without preamble. "I have information about your family situation that cannot wait for a more convenient time. Can you meet me at my apartment within the hour?" Grandmother Rose lived in an elegant retirement community that catered to well-educated seniors who valued independence and intellectual stimulation. Her apartment reflected decades of careful taste and financial prudence, filled with antiques that held family history and books that revealed her continued engagement with current events and social issues. The evidence she had assembled was methodical and comprehensive, spread across her dining room table in neat folders labeled by date and transaction type. As a former bookkeeper for her late husband's accounting firm, she possessed the technical skills to analyze financial records and identify patterns that suggested fraudulent activity. "I've been suspicious about your father's spending patterns for months," she explained while pouring coffee from her antique silver service. "Madison's lifestyle expenses never seemed to match her student income, and the family's gift-giving became increasingly extravagant without corresponding changes in Richard's reported earnings." The documents revealed a complex scheme involving inflated billing to insurance companies, fictitious patient charges, and misappropriation of practice funds designated for equipment purchases and staff bonuses. Dad had been systematically stealing from his medical partners and patients for over 2 years, using the illicit income to fund Madison's education expenses and lifestyle while maintaining the appearance of legitimate financial success. But the most damaging evidence involved Madison's direct participation in the fraud. She had submitted falsified expense reports for educational conferences that she never attended, inflated costs for medical textbooks and equipment, and received payments for research work that existed only on paper. Her struggles in medical school had been partly fabricated to justify additional financial support that was actually stolen money. Madison knew exactly what was happening. Grandmother Rose continued with sad certainty. "I have copies of emails between her and Richard discussing how to maximize reimbursement for fabricated expenses. She wasn't just a passive beneficiary. She was an active participant in planning and executing the fraud." The revelation that Madison had knowingly benefited from criminal activity while portraying herself as deserving of extra family support was devastating. Her debt-free celebration had been funded by theft from patients and medical colleagues who trusted Dad with their financial affairs and professional responsibilities. Grandmother Rose's investigation had also uncovered the scope of the legal exposure facing our entire family. Federal investigators were already examining the practice's billing patterns, and state medical board officials had received complaints about financial irregularities. The investigation would inevitably expand to include Madison as a co-conspirator and potentially implicate Mom as an accessory who had knowledge of the fraudulent activity. "The practice partners are considering criminal charges against Richard and Madison," she continued grimly. "They've discovered that patient trust funds were diverted to cover Madison's fabricated expenses, and insurance fraud charges are likely. Richard could face federal prosecution and permanent loss of his medical license." The legal ramifications extended far beyond professional consequences. Dad faced potential imprisonment for mail fraud, wire fraud, and theft of federally insured funds. Madison could be charged as a co-conspirator facing similar penalties, plus the additional charge of obtaining money under false pretenses through her fabricated expense reports. But perhaps most shocking was the revelation about Mom's knowledge of the scheme. Grandmother Rose had documented several instances where Patricia had signed paperwork authorizing payments for Madison's expenses without proper verification. As hospital administrator, she possessed the professional knowledge to recognize fraudulent billing practices, but had chosen to enable Richard's crimes rather than report them. "Patricia has been willfully blind to activities that she should have questioned," Grandmother Rose said with disappointment. "Her administrative experience should have made her suspicious of the expense patterns, but she chose family loyalty over professional integrity." The family meeting that followed was unlike anything in our history. Dad's surgical confidence had evaporated, replaced by defensive panic, as he realized the scope of his legal exposure. Mom alternated between denial and blame shifting, unable to accept responsibility for her complicity in enabling criminal activity. Madison's usual charm was nowhere to be seen, replaced by calculating self-interest as she considered how to minimize her own consequences. "This is all being blown out of proportion," Dad began with unconvincing bravado. "Medical billing is complex, and sometimes errors occur that look suspicious to people who don't understand the system. The practice partners are overreacting to routine administrative discrepancies." But his explanation crumbled under the weight of documented evidence. Bank records showed systematic patterns of fraudulent billing that couldn't be dismissed as innocent mistakes. Patient files revealed charges for services that were never provided and equipment purchases that existed only on paper, while the money was diverted to Madison's accounts. Madison's response was even more disturbing. If there were problems with the billing, they should have been caught by the practice's accounting department. I submitted expense reports in good faith, trusting that Dad was handling everything appropriately. I can't be held responsible for administrative errors that I didn't understand. Her attempt to portray herself as an innocent victim contradicted the email evidence that showed her active participation in planning fraudulent expenses. She had specifically requested increased reimbursement amounts and suggested creative ways to justify payments for conferences and research that existed only in fabricated documentation. Mom's contribution to the defense was perhaps the most disappointing. We were trying to ensure that both daughters had equal opportunities for success. If the methods were questionable, the motivation was sound. Gwendolyn's strength meant she could succeed without assistance, while Madison needed extra support to reach her potential. The attempt to justify criminal activity as parental strategy revealed a fundamental disconnect from ethical reality. They had convinced themselves that theft was acceptable if it served family goals and that Madison's fabricated needs justified stealing from patients and professional colleagues. As the scope of their legal exposure became clear, the family's attention turned to damage control and self-preservation. Dad consulted with criminal defense attorneys who outlined the potential consequences of federal prosecution. Madison hired her own lawyer to negotiate potential plea agreements that might minimize her sentencing exposure. Mom began exploring whether her hospital position could be preserved if she cooperated with investigators. But the most significant development was Grandmother Rose's decision to cooperate fully with investigators, despite the impact on family relationships. Her sense of justice outweighed her loyalty to relatives who had chosen criminal activity over ethical behavior. "I will not enable criminal activity by remaining silent," she declared with finality. Richard and Madison made choices that harmed innocent patients and professional colleagues. They must face the consequences of those decisions regardless of family connections. Her commitment to truth-telling despite family pressure became a crucial factor in the investigation's progression. The evidence she had collected independently corroborated the investigators' findings and provided crucial documentation that strengthened the case against Dad and Madison. The community impact of the scandal was devastating. Dad's patients learned that their medical care had been exploited to fund family favoritism, and insurance companies discovered systematic fraud that had cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. The medical community's trust in our family name was permanently damaged, affecting everyone who shared the Warren surname. But perhaps most importantly, the investigation revealed that my choice of rural medicine had actually protected me from being implicated in the criminal activity. My geographic distance from the family practice and my reputation for ethical behavior made me an unlikely suspect for participation in fraud. The career decision that my parents had criticized as beneath my potential had actually saved my professional reputation. The irony was almost overwhelming. Their favoritism toward Madison had led to her involvement in criminal activity, while their neglect of me had preserved my integrity and professional standing. The federal investigation moved with frightening efficiency once Grandmother Rose provided her comprehensive documentation to the authorities. FBI financial crime specialists descended on Dad's medical practice with search warrants that froze assets and seized computer systems containing years of billing records. The scope of their findings exceeded even Grandmother Rose's careful estimates, revealing a systematic fraud scheme that had stolen nearly $500,000 over 3 years. Madison's complicity was more extensive than anyone had realized. Beyond her fabricated expense reports, investigators discovered that she had opened credit accounts using the practice's tax identification number, charging personal expenses as business costs and routing payments through Dad's professional accounts. Her luxury shopping, expensive restaurant meals, and vacation travel had all been funded through fraudulent billing that patients ultimately paid through higher insurance premiums. The evidence included recorded phone conversations between Madison and Dad discussing how to maximize reimbursement for fictitious educational expenses. In one particularly damaging recording, Madison laughed while explaining her strategy for inflating conference costs by claiming hotel rooms that she never booked and meals she never purchased. The beauty of the system is that nobody questions educational expenses. She had told Dad during a conversation that federal investigators played for Mom during her interview. As long as the paperwork looks official, insurance companies just pay the claims without verification. The recordings revealed Madison's complete awareness of the criminal nature of their activities and her active role in developing new methods for stealing money. Her portrayal of herself as an innocent victim of Dad's crimes became impossible to maintain once investigators presented evidence of her enthusiastic participation in the fraud scheme. But the most shocking discovery involved the scope of victims affected by their crimes. Dad's fraudulent billing had targeted not just insurance companies, but also patients who had established healthcare savings accounts for chronic conditions. Elderly patients on fixed incomes had been charged for services they never received, depleting their medical savings and forcing them to delay necessary treatments due to financial constraints. Mrs. Eleanor Hutchinson, an 84-year-old woman with diabetes, had been charged $17,000 for cardiac procedures that were never performed. When she questioned the bills, Dad's office assured her that insurance would cover the costs, never mentioning that the procedures were completely fictitious. The stress of dealing with unexpected medical bills had contributed to a decline in her health that required emergency intervention. The human cost of their greed extended far beyond abstract financial crimes. Real people had suffered because Madison needed money for designer clothing and luxury vacations that she was unwilling to earn through legitimate employment. The patients who trusted Dad with their medical care had become unwilling sources of funding for his daughter's privileged lifestyle. Legal proceedings moved swiftly once the evidence was assembled. Dad faced 43 federal charges, including mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and theft of funds from federally insured institutions. Madison was charged as a co-conspirator, with additional counts of identity theft and obtaining money under false pretenses. Mom faced accessory charges for her role in enabling the scheme, despite her professional obligation to report fraudulent activity. The medical board moved even faster than federal prosecutors, immediately suspending Dad's license pending investigation results and initiating proceedings that would permanently bar him from practicing medicine. Madison's medical license was similarly suspended, with board officials expressing particular concern about her willingness to exploit patient trust for personal financial gain. Dad's medical practice collapsed within weeks of the investigation becoming public. His partners immediately expelled him from the group and initiated civil lawsuits to recover stolen funds and compensate patients for fraudulent charges. The practice's reputation was so damaged that they were forced to relocate and rebrand, completely losing decades of community trust and professional relationships. Mom's hospital position became untenable once her superiors learned about her knowledge of the fraudulent billing schemes. As a healthcare administrator, she had a professional and legal obligation to report suspected fraud, but her family loyalty had overridden her ethical responsibilities. She was forced to resign and face potential criminal charges for failing to report financial crimes in a federally funded medical facility. The social ostracism was perhaps as devastating as the legal consequences. Country club memberships were quietly revoked, professional associations expelled Dad from leadership positions, and former friends avoided contact to protect their own reputations. The Warren family name became synonymous with medical fraud and betrayal of patient trust throughout Connecticut's healthcare community. Madison's response to the criminal charges revealed the depth of her selfishness and lack of remorse. Rather than accepting responsibility for her actions, she attempted to negotiate plea agreements that would minimize her prison sentence while maximizing her chances of preserving her medical license. Her primary concern remained protecting her career prospects rather than accepting accountability for the harm she had caused. "I was young and naive," she told her defense attorney during a meeting that grandmother Rose learned about through her legal connections. Dad took advantage of my trust and manipulated me into participating in activities that I didn't fully understand. I should be treated as a victim rather than a conspirator. The attempt to portray herself as Dad's victim contradicted extensive evidence of her active participation and enthusiastic planning of fraudulent schemes. Her emails contained detailed suggestions for maximizing theft and expressions of excitement about the money she was receiving through criminal activity. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of Madison's character emerged during family conversations about potential plea agreements. She expressed anger that her criminal activity had been discovered rather than remorse for the harm she had caused. Her primary concern was finding ways to blame others for her choices while minimizing the consequences she would face. If Gwendolyn hadn't been so suspicious and nosy, none of this would have come to light. Madison complained during one particularly bitter family meeting. She's always been jealous of my success, and now she's destroying our entire family to satisfy her need for revenge. The accusation that I was somehow responsible for exposing criminal activity revealed Madison's complete inability to accept accountability for her choices. In her mind, the problem wasn't that she had stolen money from patients. The problem was that her theft had been discovered and reported to authorities. Meanwhile, the investigation into my own conduct was thorough but brief. Federal investigators reviewed my financial records, medical school performance, and professional activities, finding no evidence of participation in or knowledge of the fraudulent schemes. My geographic distance from the family practice and my reputation for ethical behavior made me an unlikely suspect for criminal complicity. The medical board's investigation of my conduct was similarly conclusive. My colleagues in Montana provided character testimony that emphasized my integrity and commitment to ethical patient care. The rural communities I served expressed strong support for my character and professional competence, contrasting sharply with the patient complaints accumulating against Dad and Madison. Dr. Sarah Thompson, my mentor in Montana, flew to Connecticut specifically to provide testimony about my ethical standards and professional conduct. Her willingness to advocate for my character despite the family scandal demonstrated the respect I had earned through years of dedicated service to underserved communities. Gwendolyn represents everything admirable about medical practice, she told investigators during her formal interview. Her commitment to serving patients who cannot afford premium health care demonstrates values that are completely inconsistent with the fraudulent activity that has damaged her family's reputation. But the most significant revelation came when investigators informed me about Grandmother Rose's role in exposing the criminal activity. She had been secretly recording family conversations for months because she suspected fraud and wanted evidence to support her concerns. Her recordings provided crucial documentation of the conspiracy and demonstrated my complete lack of involvement in criminal planning. Gwendolyn was never included in conversations about billing schemes or expense manipulation, she explained to investigators. Richard and Madison specifically excluded her from their planning because they knew she would object to criminal activity. Her ethical standards made her a potential threat to their operations. The irony was devastating. My parents had excluded me from their criminal conspiracy for the same reasons they had excluded me from family support. My integrity and ethical standards, which they had dismissed as irrelevant to family success, had actually protected me from the legal consequences that were destroying their lives. 6 months after the federal investigation began, the legal consequences were comprehensive and irreversible. Dad received a sentence of 12 years in federal prison for mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges, with additional restitution requirements that would consume any remaining family assets. His medical license was permanently revoked, and he was barred from any involvement in healthcare-related businesses for the remainder of his life. Madison's plea agreement resulted in an 8-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 5 years, but only if she made full restitution to victims and completed community service requirements focused on healthcare ethics education. Her medical license was permanently suspended, ending any possibility of practicing medicine in any state. The plea agreement required her to cooperate fully with ongoing investigations into medical fraud schemes at other practices. Mom's cooperation with investigators resulted in a suspended sentence with 5 years of probation, but her healthcare career was effectively ended. No hospital or medical facility would hire someone who had enabled financial fraud regardless of legal technicalities. She was required to complete community service at free medical clinics, ironically serving the same underserved populations that I had chosen to help voluntarily. The civil lawsuits filed by Dad's former practice partners and defrauded patients consumed what remained of the family's assets. The house that was supposed to be Madison's inheritance was sold to pay restitution, along with investment accounts, retirement savings, and personal property that held decades of family memories. The financial empire that had enabled their favoritism disappeared completely, leaving them with debt rather than wealth to pass to future generations. But the professional vindication I received was unexpectedly comprehensive and meaningful. The Montana Medical Board issued a formal statement recognizing my ethical conduct and commitment to serving underserved communities. They specifically noted that my choice to practice rural medicine demonstrated values that were completely inconsistent with the fraudulent activity that had destroyed my family's reputation. Dr. Martinez, the family friend who had questioned the loan disparity during Madison's celebration, became an unexpected advocate for my character within Connecticut's medical community. He organized a group of physicians who provided formal testimony about my integrity and professional competence, helping to separate my reputation from the scandal that had engulfed my family. The American Medical Association invited me to speak at their annual ethics conference about the challenges of maintaining professional integrity when family loyalty conflicts with ethical obligations. My presentation about choosing principle over family approval became a widely discussed topic in medical education programs across the country. Montana's medical community responded to the scandal by formally recognizing my contributions to rural healthcare and offering me an expanded leadership role in regional medical ethics education. The University of Montana School of Medicine invited me to develop curriculum for teaching medical students about ethical decision-making in complex family and professional situations. The rural communities I served organized an appreciation event that demonstrated their support for my character and professional dedication. Patients who had benefited from my care spoke about the importance of having physicians who prioritize service over profit, creating a powerful contrast to the selfish motivations that had driven my family's criminal activity. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the medical school we had both attended. The dean wrote a personal letter acknowledging that my conduct exemplified the ethical standards they hoped to instill in all graduates, while expressing disappointment that Madison had betrayed the trust placed in her during her medical education. The scholarship program established in my name at the medical school focused specifically on supporting students from dysfunctional family backgrounds who demonstrated commitment to ethical practice and service to underserved communities. The first recipients were students who had overcome family pressure to choose lucrative specialties in favor of primary care work in rural or urban areas that lacked adequate healthcare access. Madison's downfall was complete and public. Her former pediatric position was filled by a physician who immediately implemented new billing oversight procedures to prevent future fraud. The suburban practice, where she had planned to establish her career, issued public statements distancing themselves from her criminal activity and emphasizing their commitment to ethical patient care. The social ostracism Madison faced was particularly devastating because her identity had been built around charm and social acceptance. Former friends avoided contact to protect their own reputations, and professional networking opportunities disappeared once her criminal conviction became public knowledge. The lifestyle she had funded through theft became impossible to maintain through legitimate employment. But the most significant consequence was Madison's complete inability to accept responsibility for her choices. Prison counseling reports indicated that she continued to blame Dad for manipulating her into criminal activity, while expressing anger that her theft had been discovered rather than remorse for the harm she had caused. Her lack of genuine remorse eliminated any possibility of rebuilding trust or maintaining family relationships. Mom's attempt to maintain contact with both daughters created additional complications. She wanted to preserve family relationships despite the criminal activity that had destroyed our unity. But her efforts to normalize the situation only emphasized how abnormal our family dynamics had become. Her inability to choose between enabling destructive behavior and supporting ethical conduct ultimately alienated her from everyone involved. The most unexpected development was my growing relationship with Grandmother Rose, who became the family member I had always needed but never fully appreciated. Her courage in exposing criminal activity despite family pressure demonstrated integrity that I respected and wanted to emulate. She provided emotional support and wisdom during the legal proceedings while never asking me to compromise my principles for family harmony. Aunt Helen also emerged as a crucial ally, using her legal expertise to help navigate the complex aftermath of federal prosecution. Her paralegal skills proved invaluable in understanding plea agreements, restitution requirements, and civil lawsuit implications. More importantly, she provided validation that my ethical standards were appropriate and admirable, rather than naive or judgmental. The romantic relationship that developed with Dr. James Hartford, a fellow rural physician, provided personal happiness that had been missing from my life for years. He respected my choice to serve underserved communities and shared my commitment to ethical practice over financial gain. Our relationship was built on mutual values and professional compatibility rather than family approval or social expectations. But perhaps the most satisfying development was the national recognition my story received in medical ethics journals and conferences. The case study of choosing ethical practice over family loyalty became a teaching tool used in medical schools across the country, helping future physicians understand the importance of maintaining professional integrity even when personal relationships are threatened. The investigation also revealed that my choice of rural medicine had been far more prescient than anyone realized. The healthcare needs in rural Montana were genuine and urgent, while Madison's chosen demographic of affluent suburban families was already oversupplied with pediatric services. My work was actually more valuable and necessary than the lucrative practice that my parents had encouraged me to pursue. Financial stability came through merit-based career advancement rather than family support. My expanded role in medical ethics education included salary increases that made student loan payments manageable while providing meaningful work that aligned with my values. The independence I achieved through my own efforts proved more satisfying than any inheritance could have been. But the most significant realization was that my parents' favoritism had actually been a gift in disguise. Madison's easy life had prevented her from developing the character strength and ethical foundation necessary for genuine success, while my struggle had forced me to build integrity and resilience that served me well during the family crisis. 1 year after the federal investigation concluded, I stood in the lobby of the new rural health center that bore my name, watching patients from 3 counties receive medical care that had previously been inaccessible due to geographic and financial barriers. The Gwendolyn Warren Rural Health Initiative had grown from a small clinic serving one community to a comprehensive healthcare network that demonstrated how ethical medical practice could create lasting positive change. The naming honor had emerged from community fundraising efforts led by patients whose lives had been improved through my commitment to serving underserved populations. Local ranchers, teachers, and small business owners had contributed to a capital campaign that built modern medical facilities while maintaining focus on affordability and accessibility rather than profit maximization. My role as Regional Director of Rural Medical Ethics had evolved into something far more meaningful than any position I could have achieved through family connections or privileged opportunities. The work involved training physicians who wanted to serve rural communities, developing ethical guidelines for practices serving low-income populations, and creating sustainable healthcare delivery models that prioritized patient welfare over financial gain. The research I had begun into family dynamics in medical career decisions was now being published in prestigious journals and cited by medical schools as essential reading for students facing family pressure about specialty choices. The case study of my family's criminal fraud and its consequences had become a teaching tool that helped future physicians understand the importance of maintaining ethical standards even when personal relationships were threatened. Speaking engagements at medical schools across the country provided opportunities to share lessons learned from choosing integrity over family approval. The students who approached me after these presentations often shared their own struggles with family expectations that conflicted with their values and career goals. My experience had become a roadmap for young physicians who needed permission to prioritize service over profit. But the most satisfying recognition came from the patients whose lives had been improved through the healthcare network that emerged from the scandal's aftermath. Mrs. Eleanor Hutchinson, the elderly woman who had been defrauded by Dad's billing schemes, became a volunteer at our clinic after her diabetes was finally brought under proper control through affordable care that didn't exploit her financial vulnerabilities. Grandmother Rose had become my closest family relationship, spending her summers in Montana and serving as an unofficial advisor for the Rural Health Initiative. Her courage in exposing criminal activity despite family pressure continued to inspire my own commitment to choosing principle over convenience. At 80 years old, she had discovered a new purpose in supporting ethical healthcare delivery. The engagement to Dr. James Hartford represented everything that had been missing from my family relationships: mutual respect, shared values, and genuine support for my career choices and personal growth. He had chosen rural medicine for the same reasons that had motivated me, and our partnership created both personal happiness and professional collaboration that strengthened our ability to serve isolated communities. Our wedding was planned as a community celebration in the small Montana town where we both practiced with patients and colleagues, replacing the family members who had chosen criminal activity over ethical relationships. The contrast to Madison's elaborate, debt-free celebration couldn't have been more stark or more satisfying. Madison remained in federal prison with parole hearings scheduled to consider her request for early release based on cooperation with ongoing fraud investigations. Her letters occasionally reached me through intermediaries, but they focused primarily on her own hardships rather than expressing genuine remorse for the patients she had helped defraud. The possibility of reconciliation seemed remote, given her continued inability to accept responsibility for her choices. Dad's incarceration had been more difficult for him to endure than Madison's because his entire identity had been built around professional success and social status. Prison reports indicated that he struggled with depression and continued to blame external circumstances rather than accepting accountability for his criminal choices. His medical career was permanently ended, and his relationships with former colleagues were irreparably damaged. Mom's supervised community service at free medical clinics had created unexpected personal growth opportunities. Working directly with patients who couldn't afford health care had given her new perspective on the importance of service over profit, but her attempts to rebuild family relationships remained complicated by her history of enabling destructive behavior. The most meaningful development was the scholarship program that had emerged from the scandal's publicity. Medical students from dysfunctional family backgrounds could now receive financial support specifically designed to help them pursue ethical careers in underserved communities without family approval or assistance. The first graduating class included physicians who were establishing rural practices in areas that had previously lacked adequate healthcare access. National media attention had transformed the family's criminal fraud case into a broader discussion about medical ethics, family dynamics, and the importance of choosing service over profit in healthcare careers. Articles in major newspapers and medical journals used our story to explore how family pressure could influence career decisions and the importance of maintaining ethical standards despite personal relationships. The speaking circuit that emerged from this attention included medical conferences, ethics symposiums, and educational events where I could share lessons learned from choosing integrity over family approval. The audiences often included medical students who were facing similar pressures from families who prioritized financial success over service to underserved communities. But perhaps the most significant recognition came from the American Medical Association's Ethics Committee, which appointed me to a national panel developing guidelines for medical schools about teaching professional integrity in complex family and social situations. The work involved creating curriculum that would help future physicians navigate conflicts between personal relationships and ethical obligations. The financial independence I had achieved through merit-based career advancement proved more satisfying than any inheritance could have been. My salary as regional director, combined with speaking fees and research grants, provided comfortable living while supporting the rural communities that had become my chosen family. The student loans that my parents had refused to address were paid off through my own efforts and achievements. Most importantly, I had learned that true strength comes from choosing principle over convenience, even when that choice creates temporary hardship or social isolation. The parents who had dismissed my resilience as a reason to withhold support had actually given me the gift of independence that served me well throughout the family crisis and beyond. The rural communities I served had taught me more about genuine success than any prestigious urban practice could have provided. Patients who expressed gratitude for basic medical care that treated them with dignity and respect had shown me the difference between meaningful work and mere career advancement. The life lesson that emerged from years of family favoritism and eventual criminal exposure was both simple and profound. Integrity cannot be inherited or purchased, but must be chosen daily through small decisions that prioritize service over self-interest. The sister who received everything handed to her had lost the opportunity to develop character, while the daughter who received nothing had been forced to build strength and values that proved unshakable. Standing in the clinic lobby watching patients receive ethical medical care in a community that valued service over profit, I understood that my parents' favoritism had actually been the greatest gift they could have given me. Their disappointment had forced me to build a life based on my own values, rather than their approval creating fulfillment that no amount of money could have purchased. The sunset over the Montana mountains that evening reminded me that some paths are more difficult, but lead to destinations worth reaching. I had chosen service over status integrity, over inheritance, and principle over popularity. The journey had been challenging, but the destination was exactly where I belonged. I hope this story resonates with anyone who has ever felt overlooked or undervalued by their family. Have you experienced favoritism that pushed you to find strength you didn't know you possessed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales of triumph over adversity. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that sometimes our greatest challenges become our most valuable gifts. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions, but by the integrity you choose to maintain every day. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort and service over selfishness.